to Inner Peace, Better Health, a space where we explore how true well being isn't just about diets or routines, but about finding balance, wholeness, and peace within. I am Pragya Malvia, and tonight we are talking about a hunger that food alone can never satisfy. Because hunger can show up as longing, loneliness, or the ache to finally feel at home in our own skin. My guest is Jane, who is a counselor, author, and recovering emotional eater. In her book, Always Hungry, she shares a raw and personal journey of food, healing, and rediscovering joy. Together, we'll explore how laughter, kindness, and self acceptance can nourish us in ways that diets and quick fixes never will. So sit down, take a deep breath, and let's dive in. First of all, thank you, Jane. Thank you for being on our show. It's such an honor to host you today.
Hi, Pragya, and thank you very much for having me. It's my pleasure. Looking forward to this.
As we were talking about the book, and you also shared the title with us. So the title, Always Hungry, it hits so deep, it gives you so many perspectives because, we've all felt that emptiness at some point. And the hunger, it does not, to the masses, it does not always restrict to food. It's everything. So we know what hunger is. So what did hunger really mean for you beyond food? And what was that hunger for you?
Hmm. Absolutely. That's very true. And, on my journey, as I got to the root of my emotional eating disorder and figured out, what was I hungry for? What are we, so many emotional eaters, when we end up in the fridge or the pantry and we're not looking for food. I mean, we're not physically hungry, but we're there. What are we doing there? And that's what I had to get to the bottom of, because it wasn't physical hunger at all. I was dysregulated. We become anxious without often realizing it. So the sympathetic nervous system kicks in, it's activated, and we're trying to feel safe in the body and self-soothe. And often people turn to food or away from food because they're not feeling safe within the body. And for myself, I had a somewhat dysfunctional childhood. So the emotional eating disorder started in my teens. Absolutely. Unhappy parents, not an uncommon story. And then an early marriage, 3 young children, one that was undiagnosed but on the spectrum, so more challenging. And food became an escape. It became a comfort. It became a solace, a hobby, because I loved to bake, but there was no moderation and balance, and it wasn't physical hunger. It was, I needed help and support at the time. I didn't have a few moments peace and quiet. I wasn't getting the exercise I needed, and there was a void. Absolutely. I didn't recognize at the time that I needed more. I needed more eventually outside of the home, because I gave up my career to have the children, which is a gift. It was a blessing, and I'm grateful for that. But I realized along of this journey, when I went back to school and completed my MA, that I'd needed more outside of the home. Motherhood's incredible and wonderful and the greatest gift, but I needed a career, and I needed to figure out who I was other than being somebody's wife and mother. Along that journey, I found myself and figured out I was absolutely hungering for a life and adventure and travel and connections, and ultimately also some career satisfaction, a purpose outside of motherhood and running a home, which was, yeah. And I think for a lot of women, we get to the point where we realize we need more. I just, that was incredibly powerful to realize.
That truly would have been because, it genuinely makes us all reflect on what we're really trying to feed in our own lives. And, the hunger
Mhm.
for, sorry, the hunger for passion, the hunger for, your own life and your own desires and your own wants and your own
Mhm.
interests. That is genuinely so powerful to realize because, that is when you realize that you are also an individual entity and you have a lot for yourself too.
Mhm. Absolutely.
That's perfect.
Absolutely.
Um,
You know,
yeah,
please.
go on, go on.
Oh, I was just going to say, it was only recently that I read The Feminine Mystique by Betty Friedan. And, she
Hmm.
was describing housewives in the 50s. And back then, the doctors called it the problem that has no name. Like they couldn't work out why there was this generation of women who were depressed and sometimes suicidal. They were anxious, they were deeply unhappy, and they couldn't understand why because they'd been sold this dream of returning to home, embracing that full time and running the house and raising the children. But for many of those women, it was not enough. And what Betty Friedan described, those pages, it was just resonated on a very deep level. I realized that was me without awareness at the time. And I love my children more than anything. It was, like I said, it was a privilege to be at home with them, but I also didn't realize that I ultimately needed more. And a lot of people that choose to be a full-time homemaker get to that point. They realize that, well, for me, there was something missing, absolutely missing. I needed that purpose. I mean, there was also the emotional aspect. So many of us turn to comfort. It's perfectly natural, I think, but it's also very, very unhealthy when we're not listening to the body. There's no interoceptive awareness, and we're turning to the fridge or the pantry for comfort, for an escape. When we're not, we're not needing nutrition at that point. We're not needing physical nourishment. We're needing more. And sometimes we're just needing a hug or a lie down. We need to go for a walk. I needed all of those things. So I had to figure that out.
That is again so powerful. Thank you for sharing that with us. And, yes, I really, really get, if it's just that, once that realization hits, it's everything for you. And for
Mhm.
many people, food becomes a friend, a place to hide, a comfort after a hard day. So, how
Yeah.
did that play out in your own life? How was it for you? What was it for you? How did it feel initially and what it is now? So, everything
Mhm.
about it.
Absolutely. I mean, it was a long journey, and I think that's an important point I need to make because for a lot of people, if they're trying to lose some weight and improve, they recognize they have an unhealthy relationship with food and their body. Often people want a quick fix. But what I learned when I did lose the weight the old fashioned way is that, diets don't work. There are no quick fixes because those things are all temporary. What we need to do is make healthy, sustainable changes. For me, that meant starting with gentle exercise, which I'm now passionate about, and I work out every day, and it's become a healthy obsession. But it was also about, then getting the exercise I needed. So I felt better. We get the happy chemicals flowing. We feel better. We make better choices. And then the other big piece was just looking at my relationship with food, taking that moment of pause before just reaching for something in the fridge and coming back into the body and recognizing, okay, what is it I need? I mean, on a tough day now, I can still find myself heading for the kitchen, but I'll get there and I'll ask myself, like, what am I doing here if I've just eaten lunch? And I know I'm upset about something. So even just saying that out loud, it takes away the charge and the power as soon as we give voice to those emotions. And I'll say out loud, I'm sad, I'm upset. Sometimes it might be excitement. There are so many reasons we reach for food. And when our body, our stomach isn't asking for it, the mind is. So yeah, that was a process that really has taken years. And I think true healing does. These things can't be rushed. For me, it was a years long process of also recognizing moderation is the key. And I do advocate that. I think everything in moderation, which sounds boring, but it works because when you go for a walk every day and you start eating more vegetables and sure, I still bake. I mean, there's a cheesecake on the cover of my book. I love cheesecake. It's just something I'll have occasionally, as a treat. It's just not an everyday food. In the past when I was comfort eating, I'd have far too much on a stressful day. Let's say the children were all upset and I was dealing with a whole lot. It would be my go-to. There just wasn't balance. And what I've learned is that with balance, we can heal the body. And I healed my body naturally and lost a lot of weight and just did it by making small, healthy, sustainable changes and then persisting over time and then continuing to just move. It doesn't have to be more than walking for people that don't like exercise, but that of course then led to hiking and mountain biking. And I took up skiing again, which I'd done as a child and loved, incorporating movement that brings joy. That was also another huge piece of the puzzle for myself in just getting outdoors, because I find nature incredibly healing. I mean, there was also the yoga, the meditation piece, which is now something I do every morning, sometimes in the evening too, to feel grounded, to just reconnect somatically with my body, make sure I'm in my body. And then I can look at my hunger and ask myself, okay, what does my body need right now? And nourish myself from that place of calm. So that's the goal every day now.
That is so, so beautiful, actually. And thank you for explaining it so beautifully because that actually hits home.
Mm, mhm,
Reaching for food, it is less about appetite and all of that, but it's also about your emotions and how it regulates your emotions. That is so, so true. Um,
yeah.
as I speak of, yes, yes, sorry.
Oh,
Yeah, so as I spoke about emotional thing with food, how emotionally we are attached to it. So do you
mhm,
think that emotional eating is really about food or is it about trying to, quiet feelings? There is this concept of emotional eating, wherein
mhm,
however you're feeling, you just binge eat a lot or you have eating habits for that. So is it
mhm,
just to suppress those feelings and what can actually be done about it? How can it
mhm.
be stopped or relaxed a bit?
Yeah, no, those are great questions. Thank you for asking. I truly believe that in the majority of cases, people are trying to feel safe in the body. When we're activated, when we kick into that fight, flight, freeze or fawn, the sympathetic nervous system kicks in, and then we're dysregulated. We're not feeling safe. For some people, they'll reach for alcohol, drugs, cigarettes. Like some people, it's food, and I'm not sure why. Everybody has a different poison coping mechanism. But when it's out of balance, of course, when it's not the occasional drink, when it becomes a problem, for me, my problem, the challenge was food. It just became a crutch and a comfort. It's in those times we're just so disconnected. There's no interoceptive awareness. So in terms of healing, doing the somatic work, whether somebody seeks a therapist. I mean, there's a lot of tools available online. Janine Roth's books were extremely helpful on my journey. I mean, really quite transformative in helping me back when I discovered her in 2011 and her work around emotional eating and binge eating disorder. And yeah, over the years, I've learnt more and more and then studied psychology and got to the root of it so that I recognize even now today on a challenging day, if I'm a little dysregulated and activated, I notice immediately in the body, my brain will still immediately think food, comfort, and I can catch myself now. But for years, I had no awareness of that. So doing the somatic work for anybody who's struggling with emotional eating, call it comfort eating, whatever we call it, when we're eating and we're not reaching for food and not hungry, there's something else going on there. Huge emotions that can be frightening to feel. We don't want to feel them. Sometimes even excitement. That can also trigger anxiety in the body. We can feel, the heart rate increases. So they're not always negative emotions that do this. I think for a lot of people, whether it's sadness, grief, it's anxiety, the stresses of every day, then we're just trying to find that calm in the body and going about it the wrong way. It's really a distraction. We're just eating without awareness, just trying to self-soothe. So we need to find other tools, like other ways to soothe. Like, what are we really hungering for? That's what I had to ask myself. And now I know how to soothe myself. And 99 times out of 100, it works. Sure, there's that one time where I'll still, I'll catch myself. I'm human, you know, and before I know it, I'm having something and realizing, oh, this doesn't feel good in my stomach. My body didn't want this, but I'm upset. So, and then the self-compassion piece comes in where I just remember to forgive myself and yeah, look at that as an opportunity for further learning, like, and figure out, okay, what was going on then? So I think this journey really is lifelong, this healing journey for anybody who has a conflicted relationship with food in any way.
That is so true. And again, thank you for, sharing that with us because These are things which genuinely needs to be talked about, and people just struggle with it, but they do
Mhm.
not understand the mechanism behind it. Thank you for explaining that to us. You also write about acceptance and gratitude as your healing tools and as healing tools as in general. And I totally buy that because accepting something and acceptance of the situations around you, your circumstances, and actually being thankful about things that you already have and, just thankful for being there is genuinely what helps a lot. So why do you think that kindness towards ourselves that is harder and it is definitely powerful, but it is really harder to be kind to ourselves. So what is that and why is that a very strict discipline that we create for ourselves?
Yeah. No, I yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's, what I learned on this journey. It sounds like a paradox, but to accept something doesn't mean we have to like it, but we're accepting what is and what can't be changed. Because the reality is most things in life are out of our control and we can't change them. When we accept that, then we can look at what is within our circle of control. Then we can look at, okay, what can I change? And for myself now, acceptance is absolutely the core of how I navigate life every day. And then gratitude is the other piece because when I accept, let's say there's a traffic jam and I'm stuck. There's nothing I can do to change it. I can get upset or I can accept it. And there's so much power in acceptance because once we accept a situation, then we can look at, okay, what can I change? And it wasn't until I figured out, okay, I'm carrying far too much weight. I'm not feeling well. I'm lacking energy. I'm my relationship with food's completely unhealthy. When I got to the point of, okay, accepting where I was, then I could start to make changes. So gratitude for the people I sought out in terms of resources that were helpful, gratitude for the fact that I had the time to go for a walk when the children were at school when they were little. The fact that I could then go for a hike, exploring authors, as I mentioned, like Janine Roth, I found very helpful. Gratitude for everything, now the roof over my head. I think often we forget to be grateful for the espresso I made this morning. It's those small moments of mindfulness too, when we come back into the present, and that ties into being in the body too, like in the present. And when I remind myself to come back to those present moments and be grateful, that's where all the power lies and the joy, and then acceptance. And it's all intertwined, like pieces of a puzzle. I don't believe we can separate any of them when we're on a healing journey. So for myself, it was learning all of these different tools, like these puzzle pieces, and putting it together. And I'm working on this in my second book, writing more about the how and why of what I did and how I sustain long-term weight loss and come at the relationship with my body and food from this place. And then also just adopting moderation, using common sense, which is not that common, when it comes to just going for a walk and eating more vegetables, quite frankly, and making sure I get enough healthy protein and real food, and fruit, and as opposed to, you know, cheesecake when I want something sweet. I'll try and go for the fruit bowl most of the time, it's just common sense.
That genuinely makes a lot of sense and so true, so true. I could not agree more to all of it. Yes, that is so. That reframing is actually refreshing. Actually, a lot of people
Mm.
will talk about it, but addressing it is genuinely. It's not addressing, but it's actually analyzing what helps us in the bigger run. So thank you for
Mhm.
that. Also, I would really like to know a time when, gratitude, it shifted your perspective in a moment that you thought you could not change. But being
Mm.
thankful about it, something or a sudden change that you've seen in your life and you were like, it's because of the gratitude that I have for people around.
Mm. I discovered Tara Brach's work on radical acceptance, and there was a few other authors too when I studied psychology, and I picked up a few terrific books that were very, very helpful. And I think when I realized that gratitude for the challenges, gratitude for the challenges with parenting, my eldest who's has challenges that obviously put a lot of stress on the family. Gratitude for those because ultimately we're all closer, and I do believe they built resilience in all of us, as tough as those lessons were. Gratitude for the fact that I'm very, very blessed and lucky to have three children. I know not everybody finds it, that's not always the case. Gratitude for my family, my friends who I love and adore. I mean, that's what matters. And realizing that everything else is just superfluous. I mean, I realize everything else is a bonus. The fact that I'm able to love and I'm loved by family and friends. I'm blessed with them. I think when we're grateful for all of those things, I mean, and the little things are the big things too. But realizing that these challenges that I've been through, the moving countries, the divorce, like all of it, gratitude for being able to go back to school and learn more and heal my body. These lessons, I do believe steel is forged in the fire. Now, some people will disagree, but just I can only speak for myself when I say that I found that to be the case. And I'm stronger for these breaks, much stronger, more resilient, and just incredibly grateful that I'm very, very, very lucky that I learn so much from my children. They challenge me every day, but this is a good thing because I'm still growing, and they are too. I'm very blessed, and I do truly say thank you to the universe, like every day. Absolutely. I have a gratitude practice, and I wish I'd known this 20 years ago, but I didn't. I had to learn these. And we do need to learn these skills. I try and teach my children now so we don't all have to reinvent the wheel. You know, I'm not sure they listen, but I try.
That is so sweet and, so true again. Because thank you for sharing your gratitude journey with us, and it definitely makes a change. Also, you've talked about motherhood, and we've been talking about motherhood in this conversation. So you've
Mhm,
navigated motherhood, your life, your career pressures, and all of
mhm,
it. So, how did wearing so many hats affect your relationship with each and every one of them, because we get it, that having all these hats on our heads, it's genuinely hectic, and you
mhm.
find yourself in situations wherein you find it difficult to manage between all of this. So
Yeah.
how was
Mhm,
your relationship with all of these aspects and your food and yourself during this time?
mhm. Oh, that's a great question. And I think on this healing journey, I believe as my capacity increased, and I learned along the way. I'm a lifelong seeker and learner. And so when I did start to plow through all of the self-help books at the local bookstore, which were fantastic. I learned a lot of very, very useful practical tools, like so many other parents, and often it's the women who are juggling the career and the house and the laundry and the dishwasher and the kids' sporting activities. Tools like, making the to-do list the night before. I always make sure I look at the next day and then I plan out and figure out, okay, when am I going to fit in some exercise? So some self-care time for me. What is, I try and do food prep. So whether it's, roasting a whole lot of vegetables, in advance, make sure there's always healthy food in the fridge. So I try and meal prep and look at the week and figure out, okay, what's a busy day? Like, what can we fit in? So I've certainly gotten better at that over time. I mean, I'm far more organized now than I was a couple of decades ago, and it's really just about recognizing that there's 24 hours in the day, and to use them efficiently, and work smarter, not harder. But I also advocate, and I think it's essential that we incorporate some self-care every day, even if we don't have long. Or if I don't have a lot of time, I'll make sure I do a little bit of yoga. I'll make sure to take time out to phone a friend and sit and have a latte. Just it could be like, I don't know, buying a new lip gloss, something, those little things that bring joy. And I think, well, whatever self-care looks like, or for me, it might be blocking out an hour to read, which might sound indulgent, but for me, that helps me to then stay grounded and calm. And then I can get way more out of the other 23 hours of the day. So I don't think it's often as women and mothers, we feel it's indulgent or selfish to take time for ourselves, but it's just, we have to put on our own oxygen mask first. So I told my clients this all the time in therapy. They tell you that on the plane, you have to put on your oxygen mask before you help children. And as a mother, I didn't do that when I was younger, and I know that now. when I care for myself, then I'm a far better mother and I can show up for my kids and handle, like you say, everything else, the juggling of the career and, you know, the running of the household and who needs a dental appointment. I mean, my kids are older, but they're still that transition stage. My youngest is 17. So of course there's still mothering that needs to happen. You know, somebody has to book the dentist. Yeah, it's super important to just, yeah, I would be lost without my to-do list and everything's backed up on the phone. Like it's, yeah, we would be completely lost without that.
That is genuinely inspiring, to be very honest. It's actually your healing. It's a story. It's genuinely you and your personal relations with culture, environment, yourself, your food, your thoughts. And that is an amalgamation, right? And which is
Mm.
genuinely so, so beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I always say I'm absolutely a lifelong learner and I'm certainly still learning and far, far from perfect. But, you know, every day I just get up and try and try and do the best I can and show up with love and kindness for everybody, you know, and just keep going, you know, and I think that's something when we practice that acceptance and self-compassion, then we can just give that love and kindness to everybody else. I mean, that's not negotiable. And that's would be the core message I teach my children before anything else. We just need to show up with kindness in the world for everybody. I mean, goodness knows the world needs more of that right now. So that's something that I'm really very, very passionate about advocating and sharing that message, which I do through my Substack as well. I think sometimes we just need that reminder to slow down, say thank you, and just to be kind. And if so, I tell my kids if somebody's rude or unkind to them, they're hurting inwardly and projecting that outwards. It's about them in those moments. Typically, they're in pain and they need more kindness, not less.
That is so beautiful. And I hope, the listeners, they're also resonating it with it, because it's not just for two people out there. It's for everybody that you're saying it. And I genuinely like that thought. I was about to ask you what you want to say to these listeners around, and they pretty much know the message now, but I would really love to know, what if you could whisper something to your younger self in those painful moments? What is that one thing that you would say to yourself? Anything that you feel that, oh, this is something that I want to say to the younger self of me.
Oh, goodness, so many things. I don't know if I can choose just one. I would certainly want to tell my younger self that it'll all be okay and that she was loved and is loved. And goodness, that's a tough one. And I think just to not be scared, just to trust myself. And I think there was a lot of anxiety and a lack of self-esteem and self-doubt when I was younger. If I could tell myself, you know, most of it doesn't matter. We worry about so many little things that are inconsequential. And if I could just tell myself, you know, most things don't matter, just to remember, just to put out love and kindness into the world, because you get it back 3 times over. You know, that the Buddhist rule of 3, I think they say that. Just to remember and not to be afraid, and just to trust that it will all work out. Because I do believe life unfolds beautifully just as it's meant to. So I'd have a lot of messages for young Jane in a nutshell.
That is actually the best thing that you can do to yourself, that heals that inner child and the inner wounds that the child has seen and faced.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so true.
Also, listeners, tonight on Inner Peace, Better Health, Jane's story, it reminded us that the real hunger in our lives often is not for food at all. It is for love, laughter, acceptance, and connection. So if you have ever felt always hungry for something more, maybe it's not about eating less or working harder, but about slowing down and listening to what your soul is asking for, what you want, and what you need. True healing begins the moment we choose kindness over criticism, and that is what we've learned today from Jane, and I hope you take this away. And the most beautiful part, that choice is always in your hands, and everything about you is in your hands. Choose it wisely. I am Pragya Malvia, and thank you for joining me on Inner Peace, Better Health. Until next time, may you stay gentle, stay grounded, and may your journey toward health also be a journey towards peace. And thank you so much, Jane. You've given us so beautiful and such beautiful insights today. And it
Thank
was
you.
a beautiful conversation. It was so much learning. And there are so many things that I resonate with personally. And I hope the listeners do that too. And just
Mhm.
thank you. Thank you for being on our show and making it so beautiful.
Oh, my absolute pleasure. And thank you. Thank you for having me and welcoming me. That was just truly a pleasure. And thank you to everybody listening.